This is the 82nd episode of the Effective Executive podcast and YouTube channel. And this week I'm going to hit on a subject that it's just too big to ignore, and it's becoming bigger because of the way things have changed over time. I wrote had an episode in episode 54 where I talked about Disney's decline. And it was more functional types of things about everything from innovation to keeping air conditioning on and making life more comfortable for the customer. You can go back to that episode. It's the episode most listened to and watched on YouTube that I've had, which is almost at 4,000 views. But now we're in a different realm these days, and I'm dealing with this when I speak with a number of different companies. And the question really comes down to: does my organization get into politics or not get into politics? And I think it depends on what your business is. Some businesses doesn't really play much of a role. However, I do believe, as you've probably heard me talk about in previous episodes, that government has grown way too big, and ignoring politics and regulations and things of that sort are becoming more and more impossible for organizations. It's making it harder in organizations. And, you look at even, who creates jobs in this country. 60% of job creation is done with organizations of 100 or less employees. But obviously the big news is going to be when a large company starts to make a stand. And now, I've spoken on, I think it was episode 72, where I spoke about ESG, and if it fits what your business values are, that's something to pursue. But now we seem to be getting organizations thinking, boy, I've got to do this. And it kind of reminds me of kind of ISO 9000 at the beginning, where we got to have ISO 9000 or you're not going to be relevant. Well, that's not true. If it's going to help you, fine. I've rarely found that ISO, at least in its original form, was helpful to many organizations. It's just a whole bunch of bureaucracy that you have to, and paperwork to have to fill out. But regardless, I think we've entered a phase now where like I said, government has grown to the point where it's infringing on certain companies and organizations, and there's times to be able to, you're going to have to get involved in the politics of it. And I have to comment about the Disney company. And they decided to engage in the politics of what's going on in Florida, but to me, they've made a strategic error. And let's not get emotional about this. Let's kind of take a step back. With every organization that I work with, the first thing I do is try and identify who the customer is of an organization. It's the fundamental question to me of the business. And when an organization can answer that question, then I think that they're lost. And there's typically only one customer. There can be subsets of that customer, but there's really only one customer for each type of organization. It might be somebody with their HVAC system broken to whatever. And so the question becomes for an organization like Disney, is who is their customer? And in their case, their customer, is it the kids? No, it's not the kids. Who makes the reservations and spends the money? Well, it's the parents. And there's been a lot of talk about parental rights throughout the country, and even in some of the most liberal portions of our country. And let's just take Virginia for a moment. The Virginia governor's race showed the power of parents. The parents want to say they want some control of what happens with their kids when they go into some of these governmental institutions like education. And, Virginia was a blue state that suddenly turned red because it's such a hot topic with parents. And in the situation we have with Disney, they're already in a red state. Now, they might be able to pull off some of the things that they're talking about in California. I I think we might be surprised even there. Parents are very protective of their kids, and so turning where they were in Virginia, you turned a blue state red. Florida is already a pretty well. It's been kind of teetering, but with Governor DeSantis has been popular in Florida by keeping the state open and doing a number of other things that are business friendly. Florida is already a red state, and the parental act in education, although I think it's unnecessary to do, it was strongly supported by parents who are Disney's customer. And it can't be ignored from that standpoint that parents want a say in education about what's being taught to their kids. Now, we already know from an educational standpoint that 1 in 4 graduates from, let's say, high school, are incapable of basically reading at a level that would be satisfactory to any employer, certainly. So, if the focus would have always been on education as opposed to some of these ancillary things, then I believe that none of this would have come up. We wouldn't have had a bill associated with it. It's plain politics, certainly, what Governor DeSantis did. But he knew before he even did it that it would be popular with parents. And, none of this should have ever come up, in my opinion. If the focus was on education, then all this, like I said, all this ancillary stuff would not have ever happened. So Disney's mistake, though, here, and especially in Florida, this isn't California anymore. And like I said, I think you'd be surprised how many parents would be for something like a parental rights in education. It's just one of those things that's kind of fundamental, that parents have control over what their kids are being taught, and we're being taught things that they think should be taught at home, potentially in their church, or wherever it is. It should be directed by a parent. You get into science, you get into math, you get into grammar, then that's a whole different subject, because now you're focusing on trying to give children lifelong skills that they'll need. So, the parental rights in education had a 67% support in Florida among parents for the most part. So I think Disney's made a huge misstep here. And I think it's an important lesson for any organization. Understand who your customer is, and do your values align with their customer. If there is a disconnect, then ultimately, Disney's a huge, I go to Disney quite often. This whole thing has you kind of second guessing about where you really want to spend your money and what types of things, Disney should be focused in on, especially after some of the executive conversations that were released. Not certainly my values, but if that's the majority, if that's their audience that they're going after, I think they may want to relook at who their actual customer is, and that goes for any organization. Identify your customer, identify what's important to them, and try not to get involved in things that counter what their values are, moving forward. I don't know how this will play out. This will be interesting because Disney is a very large company. They've put out a lot of content that, parents and children have loved over the years. A lot of us have grown up with it. But I think this is fundamentally, I think this is, we talked about the Disney decline in episode 54. This adds to this. And to me, this provides opportunities for organizations like Universal Studios and a number of other places. I don't know what their stance is on these things, but I know that Disney has made a misstep here, I believe, and we'll see how things play out over time. I'm curious to see how it plays, but I just can't believe that this will turn out well for Disney, and I think this may cost Chapek as the CEO or president of Disney his job, because they're going to have to clear the slate in order to do a reset, I think, at Disney. But that's my opinion on it. But it does fit into my system about identifying who your customer is and advocating for it. I've mentioned things like the airline CEOs advocating to get rid of the mask mandates on planes, which it's just gotten nutty now, but they need to do those things because that's important to customers, and they don't want to wear masks for 4 hours on a flight to somewhere that has shaky science associated with it. So anyway, hopefully you pulled something out of this particular episode, and I'll catch you next week.